Hi, this is my video lecture on the Declaration of Independence for my AP language and composition students who missed the first few days of the semester when we covered this. And I don't know any fancy video editing, so I wish I could put some of the text up on the screen as I read it, but it'll just be me talking. So let's see. Why give this explanation of the Declaration of Independence? Isn't the purpose of the document obvious? It's right in the title, to declare independence. But that is only one of its purposes. In fact, it has multiple purposes. Also, when we look closer at the language of the document, we can learn more about how the Founding Fathers thought. But people tend to avoid the text because the language can be difficult. So, for these reasons, I talk about the history and try my best to explain the Declaration of Independence. And it might be good to, sometimes I go farther back, but for this I'll start with the settlement of the Jamestown colony in North America in 1607. There were 18 previous attempts to settle this area. They all failed. People starved, died, were killed, went back. Many of them didn't go back, they just died. But in 1607, it was the settlement of the Jamestown colony was successful, and that kind of marks that the settlement and colonization of North America. Of course, the colonization of South America precedes the colonization of North America. And then there was the Plymouth Plantation. That was the second colony in North America, 1620. That was when the Puritans and the Pilgrims came over on the Mayflower. During this time, this is the beginning of the 30 Years' War in Europe. Catholics and Protestants were fighting. This is during the Holy Roman Empire. And it bankrupted or nearly bankrupted the most powerful kingdoms in Europe, Western Europe. Now, by 1775, there were on the East Coast of North America, by then, that's 168 years later, there were 13 colonies. And King George III was ruling England, Great Britain. Now, things weren't horrible for, maybe that's one of the first misconceptions, is that for the North American colonists, you can call it British America, things must have been terrible, just awful, but they weren't. And about 20% of the colonists were loyalists. So when the Patriots, as they really did call them Patriots and Loyalists, about 40% of the colonists were Patriots, about 40% were neutral, people who didn't come down one way or another on it. They just worked hard and didn't have an opinion about it. 20% were loyalists. But for some of them, they were frustrated. Probably one of the most memorable slogans from that time was taxation without representation. So this is a business frustration that they had. And it didn't happen all at once. In 1770, there was the Boston Massacre. It kind of misnamed or exaggerated. I think 5 people were killed by the British soldiers who opened fire on a crowd. 1773, the Boston Tea Party, in response to the Tea Act, the tea tax. Boston Tea Party's famous for colonists dressing up as Native Americans and sneaking onto British ships and dumping mostly tea. They, as it says in the Declaration, they petitioned the king over and over, tried to work with them, tried to get their dissatisfactions answered, and it just wasn't happening to their satisfaction. The April 19th, 1775, is usually marked as the official start of the War for Independence, when British soldiers were to confiscate military supplies but were opposed by Patriot militia, first in Lexington and then in Concord. And these towns were in the province of Massachusetts Bay. October 27, 1775, King George III addressed Parliament, his Parliament. He said the torrent of violence has been strong enough to compel their acquiescence, which meant that he would let loose his armies upon the North American colonists, the American colonies. So the war for Independence, the American Revolution started April 1775. That kind of surprises some students because the Declaration of Independence was written and published in 1776. So a year later, after the fighting had started. And the War for Independence would go on for 7 years, 1782, and there wouldn't be a treaty to solve everything till 1783. So it was a long war. It was violent. It happened in the North American colonies. So I'll start the Declaration of Independence. The first phrase in the first paragraph says, "when in the course of human events." And I think we usually go right by that phrase, and and already it loses readers. What does that mean, when in the course of human events? When a lot happens in the course of human events. Everything happens. People order coffee. People drink coffee. People go grocery shopping. Babies are born. People die. And relationships end in the course of human events. When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. So it's in the second clause there that they're going to end a relationship. It's necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them. Separate but equal is what the North American colonists wanted to be. And a decent respect to the opinions of mankind, decent respect to the you care what other people think, requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. So, to make a little analogy with teenagers, they don't. You don't have to have a terrible relationship with your parents to want to become independent. It's normal to want independence, and if a teenager has a decent respect for the opinions, the opinion of their parents, they care what they think, they'll tell them why. They'll say, well, uh, I'm 18 or 19 now, and I'd like to move out. I have a job. I've been saving money, and I'm going to get an apartment. And I'm not mad or anything. Just want to be independent and try my way in the world. But of course, the patriots, the North American colonists, they did have some dissatisfactions. It wasn't terrible, but they wanted to be separate. They wanted to be independent. They thought they had that right. Oh, now, so when the Patriots were thinking about writing this, they didn't know what they would write. They designated 5 people, gave them the responsibility of writing it, and then among them were Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and John Adams. And John Adams said, well, Jefferson's the best writer among us. We should just let him write it. And so, and he wrote a draft and gave it to them, and they made some corrections and gave him advice. And then he rewrote it, and then they gave it to everybody. So Thomas Jefferson is considered the author of the Declaration of Independence. Second paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, all men are created equal. That's a strange phrase or a strange statement to make when all you want to do is be independent. If you, again, back to my analogy with a teenager with his or her parents, if you want to say, I'd like to move out, I have a job. By the way, all people are equal. Like, what? That doesn't have anything to do with it. That's a very odd thing. Scholars have said that Thomas Jefferson planted the greatest human rights statement in this document, in the Declaration for Independence. Why did he do that? He didn't have to do that. It doesn't have anything to do with it. And really, that is what has made the Declaration of Independence so relevant for the 230 years. We'll come back to that. We'll talk about that more. Um, and it is, I'll say something more about it now. It is kind of a pun. Um, in a way, it's a slam on British aristocracy and the monarchy because, of course, the king had was a very important person, probably seen as more valuable than normal people. Aristocracy was seen as more valuable, more important. Um, so that's part of it. That's part of it. But what Americans have done with it is that later they applied it to slavery, which is what I think Thomas Jefferson intended. And I'll come back to that. Okay, so we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. An unalienable right is a right that can't be taken away, can't be alienated from these rights. That we have the right to life. Nobody should take our life away. Nobody should take our liberty away. And nobody should prevent us or can tell us how to pursue our lives, how to pursue our happiness. We have the right to, everybody has the right to these things. And that to secure these rights, because we know that people do commit murder, capture people, all kinds of things. But to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men. Today we would say people. Do we need government? Do people need government? Without a government, um, life might be anarchy. People would do whatever they wanted, rob banks or rob folks and kill folks. And anyway, pretty much since the beginning of humanity, people have formed groups for safety, for convenience, to accomplish more. And it's not perfect. It's never been perfect because people are people. Um, but it's better than not doing that. So to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it. And to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. That is, a relationship that has been going on for a long time shouldn't be ended for light and transient causes. That is, small mistakes. I usually give the example of a boyfriend and girlfriend relationship that's been going on for years, and maybe one of them says, did you happen to get orange juice yesterday? I'd like some for breakfast. The other one says, oh no, I forgot. That's it, I'm breaking up. Been going out for 8 years, break up over somebody not getting orange juice. That's a light. It's not a heavy cause. That's a light cause, and that's so what Thomas Jefferson wrote here, and what the Patriots by signing this, they agreed with it, that they knew that they are not ending their relationship with Great Britain for a silly or light cause. They do have serious reasons. And accordingly, all experience has shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. I think that's a really for me, it was a surprising insight to hear from this document that people are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable. People will put up with a bad situation because they're used to it. And, we've heard that in different contexts. As long as it's not too bad, like it can get pretty bad though, and people will put up with it. People are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. That's the way people are. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations pursuing invariably the same object evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. So, with a long train of abuses, people have the right to free themselves from whatever situation they're in, from a relationship to from a domestic relationship to a political relationship between states. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpations, all having in direct object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And then there is the great list of abuses, which I will not read all of them. One of them, towards the end, he has plundered our seas, ravaged our coasts, burnt our towns, and destroyed the lives of our people. I think that is a reference to Falmouth, Maine in September, October 1775. So remember, the official start of the war was April 1775. So this is several months later, September, October. This is fall and winter. Captain Henry Mowat of the British Navy declared Falmouth, Maine to be in rebellion and gave the townspeople until morning to leave. He then bombarded the town from morning until sundown for a whole day. Shot cannon at it. Quote, leaving hundreds of women and children homeless as winter loomed. That is from Danielle Allen's book, Our Declaration. I believe that's a reference to that event. So give lots of reasons. You can read those. And then we get to the next paragraph after that long list. In every stage of these oppressions, we have petitioned for redress in the most humble terms. Our repeated petitions have been answered only by repeated injury. I'm not going to read everything now, but they did try. They did try to fix it without doing this, without a war. Uh, I think the last sentence of the next section, the next paragraph, um, shows that they didn't have, or wanted to make it appear that they didn't have much animosity. And now, in hindsight, 230 years later, we can see that it was true. At the time, British might have thought, oh, they're just being political or rhetorical. But we have a very close. Great Britain's probably one of our biggest allies among our best allies. Anyway, the last sentence is, we must therefore acquiesce in the necessity which denounces our separation, and hold them as we hold the rest of mankind, enemies in war, in peace, friends. So if you want to fight us, we'll be enemies. If you want to fight us on this, but in peace, we do want to be friends. And the last paragraph, we therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, I'm going to skip a little bit, solemnly publish and declare that these united colonies are, and of right ought to be, free and independent states. That is the Declaration of Independence. So let me go back to what Jefferson said, all men are created equal. And it doesn't even have to be there. And I made the assertion that it was kind of a pun, and that probably the immediate meaning was against the aristocracy and monarchy of Great Britain, and saying, well, the king is equal to any American colonist. That would be very insulting to the king, and that's probably what everybody thought of first. So how can I claim that Jefferson was also thinking about slavery and blacks, and that because we can go to his letters. If people would read his letters, they would see that. In his letter to Edward Coles of August 25th, 1814, Jefferson tells about when he was in Congress, when he first became a politician. This is before he was president. He and another Congress member, Colonel Bland, says, undertook, I'm quoting from the letter, undertook to move for certain moderate extensions of the protection of the laws to these people. I seconded his motion, and as a younger member was more spared in the debate, but he was denounced as an enemy to his country and was treated with the grossest indecorum. So Jefferson learned as a congressman, and this wasn't for the abolition of slavery. It wasn't to get rid of slavery and end it. It was to make their lives a little bit better. And Colonel Bland, who was the more senior member, certainly the senior of the two of them, Jefferson was a new congressperson, was denounced as an enemy of his country. So Jefferson was thinking about it way back then when he began his political career. And if you read more of his letters, you see that he expresses a hatred of slavery. And he thought that if anything ended the United States, that could be it. And he thought it was a terrible thing. That's why, and that's a whole other, um, subject to pursue. But that's why I think he put it here. All men are created equal. He didn't have to do that. It didn't have to anything to do with declaring independence from Great Britain. So let's see if there's anything else. I made some notes on the back here. So, of course, one purpose of this document, the first purpose was to declare independence. The next purpose would be to persuade those neutral or undecided American colonists, persuade them to join the patriot cause by this document. So the king wasn't the only intended reader, intended audience. It was also neutral and undecided colonists. And the other purpose, as I proposed, was to plant a seed to end slavery. Looks like this is a half hour. It's going to be over 32 minutes. So I should end it there. There's my, introduction, my thoughts on the Declaration of Independence, and a little bit of historical context for it. And I hope that helps students and anyone else who's interested to understand how I think about it and to understand the document itself. Thanks for watching.